Okay, hello everyone. So we enter the 6th week of this period between Passover and Shavuos, called the counting of the Omer. And as I've discussed the previous weeks in this ongoing series, that this is an intense period of personal reflection and introspection, looking into our own souls, our psyches. And just like the body has many components and parts, and physical health is dependent on understanding each aspect of our physiology and identifying areas that need supplement or strengthening and improvement. The same is with the soul and the spirit. The soul too is made up of its own spiritual DNA, building blocks, and over 300 years ago, a system was developed which is called the counting of the Omer, which actually corresponds to the 7 weeks, 7 times 7 days, 49 days, corresponding to 49 pieces of this DNA. So it's actually it's a fascinating map, fascinating X-ray of the soul, especially the emotional aspects of our lives, which really govern most of our choices. They divide into these 7 different components, which in turn divide into 7 subcategories, and hence 7 times 7, 49. And the custom, the tradition, the mitzvah is to count these days, beginning from the 2nd day of Passover, with each progressive day, each respective day focusing on another aspect of our inner personalities. So whatever it is that you did, for example, today, or tomorrow, or will do tomorrow, or any other interaction, whether it's with yourself or with others, relationships, are impacted by these 49 pieces. So the better you understand them, the better you understand yourself, frankly. And the better you understand yourself, the better you can control your decisions, at least understand them, and in many ways also perhaps season them or refine them to fulfill your deeper wishes. Many of us, just as deal with the symptoms of our lives, let's say when we have an inhibition or a fear or any particular emotional reaction, very often you ask people when they're in that state of that moment, that mode, many of us will say we don't have any control over it. This person ticked me off, I got angry, and that's my pattern. Or other reactions we have. Very often different experiences elicit some of our primal feelings and emotions that go back to our early development stage as children, things that remind us or revisit experiences we had as children. Very often the things that shaped us when we were younger are very much part of our so-called set of tools, for good or for bad, our defense mechanisms, how we react to confrontation, how we deal with challenges, and how we deal with generally taking on new possibilities, how much you allow yourself to dream and imagine, how many risks you'll take. There isn't an area in life, there isn't a decision we make that's not impacted by our emotional infrastructure, by our emotional, the spectrum of our emotions. So understanding them in detail and understanding how each one feeds into and helps shape and define your decisions and how you behave and react is obviously critical to getting control over your life. Especially areas that seem out of control, areas that we seem to be in a rut, things that don't seem to be working, whether it's looking for a relationship or whether it's just being able to take on something that is new, not be afraid of risk. How many of us shrink away from confrontation, and even knowing when to confront, when not to, when to, as we discussed last week, when to hold them and when to fold them. And I don't mean just in poker, but in general in life. These are all reactions. These are all effects affected by the causes of our emotional makeup. In addition, the way we were born and the way we are today is not necessarily the same thing. We were born with certain emotional structure. It could very well be we adjusted along the way to compensate or to protect or in some other way to deal with different challenges. For example, a child may be every child is born exuberant, bubbly, gregarious, with all the options open. If unfortunately, and I just use a strong negative example just to make the point, hopefully no one ever experiences this, but if a child from young age is told that he or she is always wrong, that he or she is always being criticized by whoever, maybe by parents, by siblings, by others, the child begins to develop all kinds of mechanisms to react to that, protect itself. Either the child can become a pleaser, never to allow anyone to criticize, and the child always pleases and thanks everything. It always overlooks his or her own interests in order to please another. Or the child become very, very angry and resentful. And all kinds of things build up as a result of the environment in which we live. So things are far more complicated than just understanding your emotional makeup. We also have to contend with all the different things that shaped us and have that we react a certain way. I remember just a very classic example. I remember it happening where a couple came to see me, and the woman acknowledged at that point that she grew up in an abusive home. But initially, when they first met each other, every time her husband would lift his hand in affection, she thought he was about to slap her. And this remained a type of reflexive reaction for a very simple reason, because she grew up in a home where when the hand was raised, even if it may have been the hand was raised, for her that was a reaction to danger. And therefore anything that looks close or affectionate for her became dangerous. This is very common, and it may sound silly to someone who doesn't understand the dynamics, but we become often we become the habits and the patterns that we develop suddenly become our second nature. And many of these things are very distorted. And once you're in it, you can't always realize, you can't always see. Like the Talmud has an expression, Ein chavish materes atzmei. A person in a prison cannot free himself. A person in fetters cannot unfetter, cannot untie themselves. When you're tied up, you need someone else to untie you. When you're stuck in a pit, you need someone else to stretch out an arm to pull you out. So, in that sense, what happens then is that when it comes to our emotions, we also have blind spots. We have many blind spots. We may not even be aware that a reaction is actually not a healthy one. We can convince ourselves that our reactions are healthy when really they're not. And you see this all the time. You see two people in the same situation, they react very differently. One person can be very fragile and hurt by, let's say, an insult. Another person is able to absorb or repel or is immune to it. So there are many factors that go into our emotional, so-called, reactions and our emotional lives. Well, this period in time is an excellent opportunity to really look into each component individually, not all bundled into one, because again, in our personal lives, everything is just one big bundle. If you separate, divide and conquer, you can identify and single out and look at each particular aspect in its own personality. So with that said, I've gone through in the last weeks, and they're all recorded so you can access them easily online. The first five of these emotions, and namely, in Hebrew, I'll say it in Hebrew and English, namely chesed, love, and gvura, discipline. We did compassion, tiferes. We did netzach, which is ambition, endurance, determination, drive. Last week was hoyt, which was humility, flexibility, yielding. So after those five, we come now to the sixth week, which is the week of Yesod in Hebrew. The word Yesod in Hebrew means foundation. So it literally means a foundation. As we'll see, it's much deeper than just a foundation. It is connected to what we shall call bonding, connection. But it's called Yesod. That's the name for it, Yesod, which, as I said, means foundational, means a strong foundation. How does that fit into the emotional spectrum? Well, you see it even in a physical structure. Most of us, or all of us, can see the floors of a building. Like we're right now in a building here, it has a number of floors. And We can measure the floors, we can identify them, we live in them, we can visit them, but the foundation remains mostly invisible to the naked eye. It's beneath the ground, and it's actually not that appealing. Nobody wants to live in a foundation. You ever see when buildings are first they first build them, they dig a big pit, and the foundations are very unelegant. They're concrete with pipes sticking out. But this becomes the foundation upon which any structure has to stand. And if the foundation is weak, God forbid, the entire structure cannot last. So emotionally speaking, the same is true. There are aspects of our lives, even of our bodies, that are very obvious. But if you take away the foundation, or the foundation is weak, the whole body crumbles. An example would be the spine. The spine doesn't seem very apparent to anyone. It connects to the back spinal cord from the back of the brain, and that runs down the back of your skeleton. But as we all know, the spine is essentially the central nervous system, travels through the spine. God forbid, any damage to the spine affects the entire body, even to your toes. Because it's a foundational. When we're talking about the physiology of the body, the spine is very foundational. So it's not about how large it is. It's not about even where it's positioned. It's about its role that it plays. So emotionally speaking, there's also emotional expressions, and then there's emotional foundation. So, for example, love obviously is the first of all emotions, is the most powerful of them all. Love. Everyone needs love. Everyone is to give love, to receive love. So love is clearly a critical element in life. The question, however, is, what is love without a foundation? What is the foundational element in love? If love is one part of the structure, what is the foundation that keeps it solid? So let's analyze a little more what a foundation may be. In New York City, for example, one of the reasons there's so many tall buildings, besides this is a metropolis and so on, but it didn't begin being so. This was once a land, part of an island that had a few people. When they bought it from the Indians and all the other urban legends or true stories. What made it a metropolis is that you were able to build here very well. Why? Because even though it's an island, the rock is very, very solid under Manhattan, and therefore became very ability not only to build buildings like we have. Usually islands are very porous because they're very close to the shores, and the water affects their bedrock. And they can't build on every island buildings just like that. It depends on the island. Some islands are very actually. Some islands are very fragile. But in addition to that, we don't not only have we built so much weight that rests on Manhattan's bedrock. Look at the train system. Not only was that, they were able to build a subway system, a city under the city. So you can imagine how foundational the rock must be. And that took a lot of research. No one knew that you could build it. You can't build a subway system, for example, in New Orleans. New Orleans is beneath the water sea level. So the basements actually continuously are flooded there. Because it's not a natural place. New Orleans was never really, it was a swampland that was drained and so on. So you can't really build a subway system. You can't build a subway system at all. In New York, you have that ability. I'm not here to laud the value, the qualities of New York, but this is one of the reasons New York was geographically a location that just was very conducive to growth. And besides the fact that, of course, it's on the harbor and on the sea and the Atlantic and all of that, but it also has elements that we don't even realize. But the interesting thing, if you study some of the architecture in New York City, you'll discover that there are like anywhere you go deep down, there were riverlets. There are always riverlets that, especially an island that's very close to the borders of the East River and the Hudson River and so on. So there's all kinds of some dried out and some still live riverlets under the water, under right now where we're not necessarily right here, but in the city itself. And some buildings, unfortunately, people don't know this until they buy them and they dig. Some foundations rest on those riverlets, and that's where it gets more complicated. I know someone that bought a building on the Upper East Side, and they were digging, and they wanted to build a mikveh actually downstairs, and the mikveh is even lower than the actual building. They had to go even deeper, and they discovered, to their chagrin, that this foundation, this building rests upon one of those riverlets. And it's not so simple, because even a small little gap can impact, especially over time, the foundation, and the foundation impacts the whole building. These things most of us are not familiar with, but neither am I. I read about it. That's how I know. But it's fascinating because it shows that we feel secure when we live inside of a building and everything seems fine. But a lot more that goes into it than you think. Someone did research and surveyed what's going on under the surface. And if the foundation is not solid and doesn't have solid ground to stand on, the entire building is in jeopardy. I don't know if you've ever taken the tunnel tours in Jerusalem, under the old city. So there's a tunnel tour today. They dug. And you could see Jerusalem of old, the way it stood, the way it was during the second temple. And the tour guide usually shows you actually what the Herculean and unbelievable architectural task was to build the temple. See, the temple is on a mountain. Jerusalem is a mountain. You see when you travel up. Jerusalem is all on mountains. It's Har Habayis. It's a mountain. It's called Mount Moriah. So how do you build a building on a mountain? It's not that simple. Here, so Herod, who built the second temple, what he did was he built a plate, a very strong foundation. He basically balanced out the mountain by building a artificial foundation, because the mountain itself did not lend itself to build something that would stand solid on it, especially a temple. He built the foundation. You see it and you could see it in the tunnel tours. What happened was, interestingly, the Romans were so obsessed with destroying any remnant of Judaism, of Jewish life in Jerusalem. You could actually see how they're trying to destroy that foundation, but they couldn't do it because it was dug so deep into the ground under the mountain. But you could see areas where they simply tried to destroy the foundation, not just the building. That's why today you'll find many in rubble, and you can find old architecture because the foundations are still there. And this is just a little trivia, just to point out simply on a physical level how foundations are critical. So now let's take it on the emotional level. You can have all 6 emotions: chesed, gvura, tiferes, all that I mentioned: love, discipline, compassion, drive, humility, and we'll skip the 6th, and malchus, dignity. And if you don't have a foundation, the building is at risk. Something is lacking. How does that manifest in an emotional life? It manifests in hundreds of ways. The difficulty or fear of commitment, the inability to bond, the lack of accountability and consistency. These are all symptoms of a weakened or a lack or a weakened foundation. So a person can have chesed, a lot of love, but if there's no foundation, it's not resting on solid ground. It changes quickly. So commitments move, mood swings, mood changes. These are all results of a weakened or a compromised yesod, foundation. So foundation, or in this case bonding, commitment, connection, is a critical component in a true, healthy and mature relationship. As a matter of fact, children don't yet have yesod, emotion, developed until they're older. A child can love. A child can also have discipline. A child can have the other elements, compassion. But type of unwavering commitment, an enduring commitment, that comes with maturity. It comes with confidence and so on. So you can basically say yesod is a critical element, not so much because we see it, but because it's the underlying force that is really the driving engine of true, mature emotions. You find people who are very sophisticated in how they love and their other emotions, but you don't find that they're able to stick to something for long, which immediately tells you their foundation is compromised. This doesn't mean we don't have it. It comes down to what we saw in our lives. Often when we see people who shaped us in our lives, as I said before, our impressionable years as being non-committal, that teaches us that non-commitment is an option. When we have all kinds of fears or insecurities or other lack of self-esteem, that too all challenges, all weakens the foundational element. So what I'm going to be speaking about is this component. Number one, identifying it as an issue first of all in our lives. And number two, what can you do about it? Because an obvious question is, if the foundation is faulty and the building has already been built, what are you supposed to do? You're not going to knock down the whole building just to fix the foundation and destroy our lives because we have to go to the foundation. So obviously, there are ways to do things about that Yesod foundation inside of us. It's not necessarily destroying the rest of our emotional faculties. But as always, you have to begin with identifying. And each of us has that emotional element called foundational element, or the capacity to bond, to commit, to connect. And the question is, number one, is to analyze and to diagnose what's the status of your Yesod commitment. This you can do on your own. We're not going to do this in public here. Group therapy has its limits. But it's something that's critical to define, because understanding yourself in that context will begin to be the process, as I always point out. Have the cure is awareness. You can't talk about you can't solve something unless you're aware of the issue. If you think it's not an issue, or you don't even know that it could be an issue, clearly you're not going to address it. And very often, especially when it comes to emotional issues, as I always point out, most people, I would say all people, when they identify a problem, it's usually not the problem. Someone comes to you, someone comes to me and tells me, here's the issue I have. I'm not talking about the superficial thing. Something deeper. In most cases, I could say 99% of the cases, that's not the problem. That's the symptom of the problem. Because we identify what we're feeling. That doesn't mean that's the problem. That's the feeling you have. But where that feeling comes from can be is usually in a much more foundational place. So we identify symptoms, if at all, if identifying anything, but not causes, not the root. So you saw the foundation is a critical element in understanding the root of something as opposed to its impact. If you see a building leaning, it's usually not a result of the building, it's usually something to do with the foundation. If you see any type of fundamental compromise to any given situation, most often it's not what you see with the naked eye, it's a cause, it's something within that's affecting us. Now today this is common knowledge. We all know that we don't measure today things by the physical makeup. You look at the DNA, the genes, hereditary things, and you look at the chemicals, you look at the microscopic elements, the atomic structure in existence. That's what defines when there's a malfunction or there's some type of mutation. It's usually on a cellular level, and that in turn impacts the outer dimension. That doesn't mean, of course, that a person cannot, God forbid, get hurt or wounded let's say their finger is burned. Obviously, that didn't begin from the root. But even a burn, its real impact is not on the outside level. It's what it does to the layers of the skin or to the nerves and so on. So today, common knowledge that we always look for underlying causes, and the same is true with this issue of Yesod. Very many of our issues, many of our challenges, our problems, you can target and focus in and zero in on that Yesod is the issue. That's the sixth emotion that we're addressing tonight. That is the issue to address. In other words, our love may be healthy. It may be intact. Our other emotions may also be intact. But the challenge is the foundational aspect. So let's address that for a moment. Maybe a good way to begin is share with you a story that happened many years ago. There were a couple coming to this class, or a couple, they were dating each other for a while. And after a while, a woman came to speak to me. She said, look, I've been dating this guy for 2 years. We're like, as close as any husband and wife, and I want to marry. I want to get to marriage. And he refuses to talk about it. So maybe you can have a conversation with him and maybe get to the bottom of it. Because it's not like he's not committed, not interested in anyone else. He's not like keeping his options open. We're together all the time. So why not? Just do it formally and in a way that's secure, and so on. And he was willing to come speak with me, so we spoke. We met, I remember, it was in Brooklyn at the Grand Army Plaza Library, right near the Brooklyn Museum, Botanical Garden, Prospect Park, that area. So there's a nice cafe, top floor of the library. So that's where we met. And we were talking. He was very open. He was willing to talk. He wasn't defensive in any way. It wasn't like saying it's her problem or something like that. He says, yeah, he doesn't see any reason to take this further. and everything is nice as it is. So, of course, I went through what we call the usual suspects, did he go through a difficult divorce, or were his parents, did his parents have a difficult marriage? The usual reasons that many people are afraid to commitment, because they've seen commitment and they've been hurt, or they've seen pain in that regard. Nothing, all the usual suspects, all the checklists didn't fit this bill, because everything seemed fine. And I had no clue how to help here, but we were having a conversation as we speak, which often happens. Suddenly something strikes you, and suddenly something struck me. I don't remember what it was exactly. It was just, I guess, the collective conversation we were having. At some point, I got like an instinct, and I said to him, I'd be surprised if you have commitment to anything. I don't think the issue here is the commitment to the woman he was dating, or about marriage. I would be surprised. I think you don't have any commitment to anything. Is there anything that you feel that you are absolutely ready to die for? Something really necessary. Something that you would do whatever it takes. Not optional. And he looked at me and said, no, not really. Nothing. Not his work, not his money, nothing. So then he turns to me and just, because we were having this open conversation, he says, what about you? What would you like? What would you die? What would you like die for, so to speak? What are you committed to? So, being that it was a very spontaneous conversation, I didn't have a planned, canned response. So I don't know, for some reason I had a flashback to my own childhood, and I shared with him the following. This was completely it was not a planned mission statement or something like that. And I shared with him, I said, when I was a kid, I remember, and it was the first time I remembered actually when this conversation came up. When you have these type of honest conversations that my father would like to call open heart surgery, heart to heart. Things come out. That's what usually happens when you have honest conversations. Things emerge that you didn't expect, because they're not planned. When you have a planned conversation, everything is manipulated, everything is contrived, everything is controlled. It's just very natural. So I shared with him, when I was a kid, I had this quirk. It was my own little private little secret. Every kid has their secrets. And the quirk was that I remember school, from my home and school was a distance. I used to take a bus, but I could also walk or take a bike. Walking was 25 minutes. And for some reason, when it would rain, I liked to walk. That was not the quirk. That's weird enough, I understand. But the quirk was this. Why did I like walking in the rain? Not because I like getting wet, but because when the rain would rain on the streets, the water would flow. The road would would flow down the sides of the sidewalk, the stoop. The edge of the sidewalk would hit the road. And I had this quirk, just maybe 7 years old, 8 years old, that I would go and clean the paths, get rid of the twigs or dirt or paper or whatever to allow the flow to go smoother into the sewer in the corner. This was a quirk. I don't know what kids have their things. Was I changing the world by doing this? Probably not. But that was my quirk. I just enjoyed doing it. And I said to him, I said, and you know something? Your question elicited this. This is my passion. I'm absolutely committed to doing this. From when I was young. So there I was just doing it with twigs and paper. But today I feel a deep inner longing and a deep commitment and deep responsibility to help wherever I can clear a path. Today I do it more psychologically. Wherever you can clear away a block or inhibition or a fear, or help somebody see it in a new way so they can get over an obstacle. I have absolutely committed to do that my whole life. The interesting thing that happened, he started crying actually as I shared this, because it came from my heart, and it was just and he said to me, I wish I had a cause like that. So I shared the story because we had right there a moment where I had a yesod, a foundational element, and he was lacking one. So let me just tell you the end of the story. It's a happy ending. Whatever it was that was the catalyst, I'm not sure all the details. Must have been that conversation and many others. Today they're married, they have nice children, a beautiful family, they live in Manhattan. So some stories have happy endings, just for the record. in summer camp, I remember, you do these type of plays and everything, and since the plays always in summer camp have happy endings, so being a little mischievous, I decided to do a play that had not a happy ending. But you have to tell the script to the judges in color war, whatever it is going on. And when they saw that, they said, you'll lose immediately if you do that. So I say, come on, that little change. All these plays, they all end up with happy endings. Once in a while, we need something a little more realistic. Anyway, I didn't get my way. But happy endings are always nicer, to be honest. But they're always accurate is another thing. So in this case, it was a happy ending. And to take it back to my discussion here is, so commitment is not just about blind commitment to something just in order to commit. It's when you have a reason or you have something that you truly are compelled, a sense of urgency, a sense of mission, your calling. That is what gives people real reason to connect and bond. So that is the real antidote to a situation where we find, especially in our day and age, lack of commitment. We can analyze the reasons for it, but there's no question in my mind that part of it is also due to our comfort zones. Especially for Jews, when you're running for your life, and every day is an unknown, because you don't know who's going to expel, or try to kill, or try to destroy you. What happens, interestingly, even though you can say, well, that really creates a very, what shall we say, a very shaky and insecure situation. But fascinatingly, the Jewish people, they became extremely strong they built very strong foundations because of that. So spiritually, they were they're unmovable. And precisely, even a situation that was dangerous. So dangerous and so-called unexpected on the outer level created a very deep foundational elements on the inner level. Today we have the exact opposite situation. Today nobody has the fears that existed 100 years ago, 70 years ago, several hundred years ago. We live relatively in a peaceful world. I mean, obviously every place there's danger, but it can't compare it at all. This is not the Nazi age. It's not Stalin's Russia. It's not the pogroms. So you live in comfort. I mean, you can sleep peacefully and you don't have to worry in the middle of the night someone may come to arrest you, and so on. What happens is develops a comfort zone, which frankly is a blessing, obviously. But it also, like every blessing, has its other side to it. It's a double-edged sword. In the sense, the blessing on one side, the other side of the coin, is that it creates a new challenge. The challenge is, what do we stand for? When you don't have to fight for something, what do you stand for? And I've asked this question to, I don't know how many, hundreds, maybe thousands of, especially young people in this country, of all walks of life, Jews, non-Jews, especially younger. What do you stand for? What do you believe in? What are you ready to fight for? And most people's response, what are we ready to fight for, is usually related to either video games or the sports team that you're a fan of, because this country does not have to fight for anything. There's nothing to fight for. Thank God we've not had a war on this soil for many years. So what tends to happen is we tend to atrophy, you can put it this way, in the context of what we believe in. What's our vision? And most people cannot answer that question. What is my vision for life? Besides, I mean, obviously, if you're a wordsmith, you can come up with all kinds of platitudes that sound like you're saying something but saying nothing. What's your vision? So people say to be successful, to be happy, to make money, to be able to change the world. But you press someone for some details and then find out what they stand for. And this is not meant to be a critique. It's simply a symptom of our times. It's a symptom of easy life. Now, I'm not suggesting everyone has an easy life. There's plenty of challenges. But the challenges are far more within than they are without. So in a strange way, when you don't have challenges from outside, someone challenging you in what you believe in, you end up not believing as much. So it's very obvious that this sixth emotion we're addressing this evening, called Yesod Foundation, in our day and age, is the one that is most compromised and most lacking. Because many of us don't feel we need one. How many people feel that they need a sense of calling? Now, it doesn't mean our souls don't hunger for it. Some of us are desperate, but there comes a point where you get caught up in your job and survival, and the war and the battle for survival takes over your life, You don't have time to think about these things. I asked a person who's his life is not going very well, emotionally, personally, professionally very well. He's making money and all that. But he's miserable. So I asked him, so what do you feel is your calling? What is your calling? He was almost like, he was incredulous at the question. He didn't know what I'm talking about. He says, well, who says I need a calling? When I hear that, for me, that I cringe when I hear that, because to me that's like the basis of a human being is that you need a calling. It's what drives a human being. But I see it's very easy to replace it with the rat race, with the success, the instantaneous, the temporary, instant gratification and temporary success. Money is an excellent distractor. So are other forces that consume our lives, whether it's sexuality, whether it's the different entertainment that keeps us busy. Today we have who knows how many channels and how many options that to entertain ourselves. So that keeps us all busy. It's not a surprise that we live in a world of so many addictions. Addiction per se means that you are bound to something. It's actually obscenely the antithesis of yesod. It's a foundation, but the wrong thing. You're bound and committed to something that is controlling your life. What is its root? Its root is that there's a lack of bond to something else. So since a human being, especially passionate people and creative people, you'll see are the most addictive personalities. Because that's their energy. They're looking for passion. They're not mediocre. A mediocre person will have mediocre addictions. But a very passionate person will have very passionate addictions. Because they're desperate. If you're very thirsty, you're very hungry, you're very driven, and you don't get the nourishment, what are you going to do? You'll find something that will do anything for you. The difference between addiction and a healthy commitment is this commitment, the substance is controlling you. And the healthy commitment, you're controlling the substance. That's a small little difference. But in both cases, it's total and utter commitment. The ability to say, I am committed completely to this, and unwavering, it's unconditional. Take another sensitive subject, loyalty. How many people can you identify in your life that are really loyal? Many people say, I thought people were loyal until something happened, until there was competition, until they were fighting for my job, until push came to shove, when there was a real crisis or situation, and it was their skin or mine, loyalty goes away. What does that tell you? That there's no absolute commitment, there's no absolute loyalty. You're blessed if you have someone that has loyalty, that is absolutely unconditional loyalty. And I wish it upon everyone. But it's yet another thing in this world that happens. And even people that you would never believe, give them enough money, give them enough incentive, and they suddenly can convince themselves that they're not even disloyal. Because what happens is it plays with your head, and you start thinking, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. Some people are quite aware they did. But many people sell out for whatever it is that seduced them. These are all symptoms and all examples of a weak or a compromised foundation, yesod. And one of the main reasons in our time is because when there isn't a foundation that's healthy, what's going to happen is there'll be other so-called commitments that we will come bound to that we can't free ourselves of. So everybody's got stuff like that. The question only if it's healthy or not. So with that said, it's just some food for thought to understand, to look at ourselves and try to analyze and try to so-called diagnose where we stand in this regard of commitment, loyalty, and so on. And it's not always comfortable to look at this. It's easy to point at others that are not loyal. The question is, how loyal are you? Are you the only person that wouldn't sell out if the price was high enough? No. And this is not meant to make anyone feel uncomfortable. As I said, you don't have to answer this question. But if you want to be an honest person, you have to look at yourself. And it always will come down to what you really believe in. Obviously, like I mentioned last week, if a tree doesn't have deep roots, it's going to fall. If a tree does not have a foundation, when the right storm strikes, all our morals and all our values will go the other way. Look, one of the most painful and unspoken chapters in our history are the capos in the Nazi concentration camps. These were the Jewish so-called Nazis that the Nazis employed to use them against the Jews. People did anything to protect themselves. And then there were people that would never do that. No matter how much they were tortured, how much they were threatened, they would never turn someone else, and they died before they let someone else die. And there are many others that didn't do that. Nobody likes to talk about it because there are people who have children and stuff like that. See, I always ask myself that question: what would happen if I were under such duress, such dire circumstances? What would happen? Not an easy question to answer, because we all no one would believe that we were capable, that someone is capable of turning someone else in, even their own brother and sister, just to save their own skin. But people have done it, and good people did it. You could say they were weak. Torture changes your whole disposition. You can't imagine. But there were people that were noble till the end and never did that. The difference is, one has a yesod, a foundation that was unwavering, and nothing could change that. The other did not. All you needed was a strong enough incentive to expose that they didn't have that firm and absolute conviction. So in our times, thank God, we're not tested this way. And no one should ever be tested. But it does reflect itself in our relationships, in our lives. And you find commitment is becoming, for some people, commitment actually is a dirty word. I mentioned this already, just so tragic and humorous at the same time. A guy I know comes to the class once in a while, very smart guy, good-looking guy, has everything going for him. And he tells me one day, I finally have achieved my, her nirvana. He reached his utopian dream. A relationship without commitment. That was what his waiting for. Find a relationship without commitment. He found somebody that's going to be a relationship without commitment. And I asked him, so what does she think about it? He says she doesn't know yet. He hasn't worked out. Of course, it would be ideal if she also was the same way, but that's not what he wants. So I said, I sent him, and I said to him, so you're telling me a relationship without commitment? Isn't a relationship and commitment synonymous? No. Very simple. For him, relationship means getting his needs met. Whatever he needs at this moment or this period in time, and that's it. So I said, I wouldn't call that a relationship. I would call that basically a parasite. Why is that called a relationship? Parasites also have a relationship. You give the blood and they drink it, So there's a relationship. Give and take. They told that one about this guy that was drowning in the water, whatever his name was, Jack. And Joe keeps saying to him, give me your hand. And he will not stretch out his hand. And as he's going down, someone says, tell him, take my hand. Joe never gave anything to anybody. If you tell him, take my hand, he'll grab it. So he said, take my hand. So then he grabbed it. So they're givers and takers, so to speak. Obviously, nobody likes to say I'm not in a relationship. It's a relationship on my terms. That's what it means. A relationship is far more complicated than that. And commitment, as I said, has become a dirty word because you know why? Because in the instant gratification age, if I can press any button and get what I want, why should I have to pay a price? If I can get it without a price, it's better. Now, that may be good for commodities or free products. But when it comes to a relationship, if you get it without a price, it's not a relationship. It's like real relationships take work, and work is not a bad word. It happens to be a healthy word. That's what the healthy human beings embrace. But again, this is only possible in an age like ours, an age of plenty, where we have so much, how much food is thrown out every day. And we have so much excess and comforts. Even with recessions and everything, compare this generation to any other generation economically. This is a golden age. Even though while we're in it, we're complaining. That's how people are. So the classic story that I've told many times with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, it just captures it so well. But it's really the story of history in many ways. When he was arrested by the Soviets and for counter-revolutionary activity, which was a euphemism for basically Judaism, counter-revolutionary activity, and he was arrested and he refused to cooperate. So one of his guards was particularly vicious and happened to be Jewish. Maybe that's not a contradiction, but he happened to be a real Jew hater. He pointed a gun to the Rebbe's head and said, "Rebbe, it's time to start cooperating. This thing here, this pistol, has made many people cooperate." And the Rebbe, without flinching, looked at him in Yiddish. They spoke in Yiddish, mind you. without flinching, he says to him, this toy, in Yiddish toy is a tzatzka. This toy can frighten someone that has one world and many gods, but not someone who has one God and many worlds, or two worlds. Think about these words. It can frighten someone that thinks that all of life is here and now. So take that away, I have nothing left. So they'll do whatever it takes to hold on to their little piece of turf. But someone that has one God and many worlds, means many dimensions of life. Not that he was looking forward to die or that he wanted to, but you're not going to frighten me because there's a spirit that doesn't die. This has been the essence of what Jews always knew. Mordechai knew it when he wouldn't bow to Haman. What's the big thing? He would have bowed down to Haman. He wouldn't have all the problems. Haman wouldn't have gotten angry. All this insistence that Jews would not bow to the idols. They would not bow in the physical idols, the metaphorical ones. They refused to conform. This is the key to someone who has something that they believe in. Nothing can change that. And it doesn't matter if anyone's watching or no one's watching. There are many of us would not do something if others are watching. If someone's watching, we'll be careful because we have a reputation. There are people who don't even care if people are watching either. That's another category. But there are people who, if someone's watching, they won't. But when you're not with someone, no one's watching, hey, you can get away with it. And there are those people who are true and honest, has nothing to do with whether there are others that are watching. I mean, just to make sure that we don't think that we're so terrible, even in the Talmud, Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, a great scholar, at his deathbed, he told his students, and these were great Talmudic students, he told them exactly that. He said, Halavai, may it be that you should fear God as much as you fear people. Because God is invisible. People are there, and we're ashamed. There's a thing called shame. As I said, someone who doesn't even have that shame, I'm not even discussing right now. But that's how it is. That the ability to have something that you're fundamentally connected to, and nothing can change that, is it's a rare commodity today. And one of the reasons is what I mentioned is comforts. We're not forced to make such choices. So we stay on the fence, we stay in the uncommitted level. Like the guy that said, I used to think I'm indecisive and now I'm not so sure. You know? So there's the element of, like the pollsters will say, today you have three options. Yes, no, maybe, or undecided. So the guy says, I think I'm undecided. You know, that's also a category today. This is when you have a lot of options. You go to these menus in restaurants, they're like basically like an encyclopedia of it's ridiculous, right? You can't even choose. There's too many options. The point is that this affects every aspect of our lives. This isn't just some type of religious issue. This affects our lives because the healthiest relationships, the best comes out of us when we're truly committed to it. And you see this all the time. You see those that are committed and bonded to whatever it is they're doing, they will not take no for an answer. They will they'll be able to face obstacles and crises and challenges because there's a strong foundation, there's a strong connection. Nothing is going to change that. Now, all of us are capable of that. All of us are born with that particular faculty. It's compromised as a result of, as I said, of our upbringing, what we see around us. When you see lack of commitment around, lack of bonding. And it's compromised because of, as I said, the world in which we live. But it affects and spills over to everything that one does. So if you were to ask yourself a series of questions, one of them would be, how committed are you to things? What is your commitment like? Now, obviously everyone will say, I'm very committed to myself and my needs. Well, that really fits into this category, because that's basically pure survival. But commitment means, do you have a cause? Do you have a calling? Do you even think it's important to have one? And how committed are you to it? You'll find you're not going to have necessarily strong answers. I'm not saying, I can't speak for all of you here, but this is, because I've tested the so-called the cross-section of different populations, not in any scientific way, and I know that many people don't have answers for these questions. Not because of any malicious reason, because no one ever told you to ask those questions. At the beginning of this year, Rosh Hashanah time, I gave a talk about finding one's mission statement. And I was talking about how we can do this and help our children inculcate in them that type of attitude. So a woman asked me, a mother said, what can I do for the new year that can help my children grow up having that sense of mission, having that sense of unwavering foundational commitment? So I said, very simple. You have to have a commitment yourself, and that is that every morning and every night, besides telling your children, I love you, you should also tell them you're distinct and unique and indispensable, and that you have something absolutely necessary to contribute to this world. And you have my full confidence that you can achieve it. So you say this to children every morning, every night, from a young age, guarantee that you're going to have a different type of child. And if you don't say it, it also tells them something. It also sends a message. Because saying that makes the child think about it and builds the confidence. And even if they may not find it, but they know it's something important. I wish I said it to my own children every day, to be very honest. But we don't think about these things. For number one, no one told us. So the simple thing like that can change lives is something that we don't think about. We're distracted. How many other important things do we neglect? As I said, with the foundation. In other words, there's the story they tell, or the analogy they say. It was actually a woman and her husband were by one of the Rabbis, and the woman was complaining. She said, when we have guests on Shabbos or other times, people are always complimenting my husband about his nice words and so on. And they don't appreciate all the work I do and so on. And this Rebbe answered, he said, look, I'm not justifying it. People are superficial, they don't appreciate, they should be appreciating, but you have to remember that we live in a superficial world. When someone comes into a home, what do they compliment? The furniture, the paintings, the structure, and so on. You never hear someone saying, oh wow, what kind of powerful foundation must be under this building that keeps it standing. Foundations are not, as I said earlier, elegant. Foundations are invisible. People don't compliment foundations. They don't even think about foundations. It's out of sight, out of mind. Even though it's the basis of who we are. Even they talk about it as children. We are our parents' children. Our parents are the children of their parents. These are foundational elements. What shaped you happened a long time ago, before you were in control. The mitzvah that says in the Torah, the 10 Commandments, honor your parents. L'man yaricha yimecha, in order that you live long, is one of the complicated mitzvahs. Many people have issue with it. I remember years ago in the late 90s, or actually in the early 2000s, I was doing a radio show. It's called Torah Meaning for Life, a show for skeptics and seekers. It was a live show in the city. We were based in the city. It was on WVD every Sunday, 6 to 7. And it was a call-in show. It was very fascinating. I don't know if any of you remember it. We have all the recordings, we have the transcripts. But I chose especially topics that were like offbeat, topics that others didn't address. Well, I remember one week the topic was how to honor parents who don't seem to deserve honor. Oh man, there weren't as many calls as that week. That was the most popular show of them all. And the calls that kept coming in were all about the horror stories about parents. That, how could you honor parents that were abusive, that were absentee, that were hurtful, the whole thing. I was so exasperated at some point in the show. I said, "Is there anybody out there that loves that doesn't hate their parents? Can you call in?" So I was thinking either nobody loves parents, or I happen to attract people that don't love parents. I don't know. So I wasn't sure about that. Well, finally a call comes in. It says, "Hey, you've asked for someone who doesn't hate their parents, but I'll tell you my story. I hate my children. And they hate me." Okay, so that was some consolation. But that was the show. The point I want to make was that one of the points I addressed in the show was the issue of honoring parents that don't seem to deserve. How can the Torah make this blanket general statement that honor your parents? And not only that, it adds in order that you should live long. What's the connection of one with the next? And what happens if you do have parents that are abusive and hurtful? As a matter of fact, even from a psychological health situation, parents that are extremely abusive, it may be actually healthy to stay away from them. So what does it mean? What does the Torah say to honor? So briefly what I answered was, and I'm just bringing it in because it's, I think, important to understanding an element of the foundations of our lives, is that The Torah doesn't say love your parents. That's optional. If they deserve love, love them. It says honor. Honor is a different word, kabed, kibud. Honoring your parents is not about honoring your parents. It's about honoring the life that they gave you. Because even if they're the worst parents, the fact is that life came through them to you. And if you don't honor that, you're really not honoring yourself. So if parents are good parents and healthy parents and they deserve honor and love, then great. Then there's no question. But even if they're not, honoring them doesn't mean that you have to do what they want. Doesn't mean that you have to follow their guidelines or they're abusive, that you have to listen to whatever they say. It means you're honoring the life that came to you through them. You'll find many people dealing with difficult parents, one of the most important things to learn to heal is to forgive yourself. Because what happens is, unhealthy parents cause us to think that we are worthless, that we are not valuable. One of the big things, children of divorce, they blame themselves. I know it sounds odd, why would they blame themselves? But that's how it is. Because children will not blame their parents. So to honor life means you're honoring the life that you were given. If your parents were blessed to be healthy conduits, then great. But if they're not, that's the minimum. Which means you can honor your parents by never talking to them the rest of your life. You can pray for their souls that they should heal. Doesn't mean you have to have contact with them. And I don't want to go into this topic because it's a whole other subject. But that's why it also says that you will live long. Because it's not about because you honor your parent tit for tat. It's because you honor life, so you get more life. So the foundations of a person's life are invisible. I say this also in context of just yesterday was my father's 8th yahrzeit. So I think about this. My father. No human being is perfect. My father was not perfect, but he was my father, and he happened to not be abusive, so he deserves honor and love even based on his behavior. But I remember when my father passed away, it was maybe I would say not maybe, but definitely the most impactful experience in my life, more than anything else. And the only way I can understand it is because parents affect you from even before you remember. I look now at my children, grandchildren, and they won't remember when they were so cute, 2 years old. But that was the age when they were shaped, when we were shaped, and who's your life? Your parents. So when a foundation is shaken and a parent is taken and leaves this earth, it has a very deep impact on the structure. That's how I understand it. Like a very deep deep connection, and you really realize it actually after a parent's death. No one should ever know of this, but those who have lost a parent can probably identify with what I'm saying. So I mentioned that also in that regard. But it also helps you to focus not on the symptoms, as I said, not on the superficial, but on the real foundational elements that make us who we are, that shape us who we are. And my father happened to be a man of absolute commitment, at his great expense to himself. So I was around a real yesod, a real foundational type of person. He was like extraordinary in that regard. And anyone who's ever been around a person like that knows the impact that it has on you is very, very profound. I was also around the Rebbe, who was also very much like that. People who were unwavering in their commitment to the things they believed in. And not in an obstinate way, not because they were inflexible, they weren't kind and so on. No, because their calling was complete. It completely consumed them, and that is what mattered. And everything else was secondary. And that is a very profound thing to be able to observe, because it rubs off. So if you don't have anything like that in your life, you never met anyone like that, obviously it's going to be a novelty. It's almost sounds like a fantasy. If you have met someone like that in your life, you know what I'm talking about. Now hopefully all of us can become someone like that. It always helps by osmosis to see others. It's like, you don't become a commander-in-chief of an army just from the beginning. When you hang around with people that are confident, that are driven, that have that fortitude, that ability to just be committed and bonded to something, then as one learns from them, you learn to do the same. So what I would submit here, that in context of our discussion here this evening, that this is the foundational aspect of one's emotional structure, is a critical component, especially in real, enduring commitments. That's where it really expresses itself. Like I said, chesed, love, you can find people that have love for a while under certain conditions. But unconditional, lasting, enduring, when we say binyan adayad, an enduring relationship, that one that is like a being, a structure that is forever, that requires this element of Yesod. So let's apply it to relationships, since I'm talking about relationships. I once was giving a class at the Learning Annex here in the city. Learning Annex has all types of different courses and classes, and it was on relationships. I think it was called enduring relationships or soulful relationships. I'm not sure. I don't remember. Or the spirituality of relationships. So the opening question I asked was to around 50 people, men and women, was, does anyone believe in love forever after? And out of 50 people, one young woman raised her hand. So 49 did not believe in it. Love forever after. And then I asked the question, why? So different people had different reasons. But one of the things that emerged, which was pretty poignant, was that nothing in life lasts forever. Not the food you eat, not the money you make, not your looks, nothing. Everything in this world erodes, ages, and dies. So why suddenly should we believe that love lives on forever? Enduring, love forever after. And in response to this young woman who raised her hand, someone even cynically smirked and said, yes, she probably was never in a real relationship yet, so she didn't get burned, so she still has the fantasy. She's read too many novels or seen too many movies. That's how she was dismissed. And the point was well taken. It's true. Nothing lasts. Why suddenly do we have this illusion that love can last forever? And most people would maybe not say they believe in it, but would like to believe in it. And the answer is very basic. It's true. On one end, that's true, but there's another dimension that has to be introduced. And the reason the question is so easily answered in this way, that no, the answer is no, is because we live with our perspectives. Based on our perspective, it doesn't seem scientifically possible that something should last forever. So in a relationship, and this is what I shared there and I'll share here, there are, I may have discussed this more than once in this class, but it doesn't hurt repeating, that when you look for what we call compatibility, the compatible factor, two people, what makes people compatible? There are three types of compatibility usually can categorize. One would call physical compatibility. People are attracted to each other, physically, sexually, physically, appealing to the eye. Second is emotional compatibility. You can be attracted to a supermodel and nevertheless meet that person and not be able to have a conversation. There's no emotional connection. So there's emotional compatibility, feeling for one another. Then there's intellectual compatibility. Not just feeling, but also you share ideology, respect another person's opinion, have a good conversation. It's stimulating. So I asked that same class, I said, so tell me, what do you think about these three things? Everyone said, if I had one of the three, I'd be happy. Which was depressing. 2 out of the 3, that's almost perfection. 3 out of the 3 is not even realistic. It's interesting. Okay. You want to weigh in on this?
What are the 3 again?
That's the 4th option. You don't even know the 3. You tell me. What are you looking for? Physical, emotional, intellectual. Okay. PEI, physical, emotional, intellectual. Does that represent something? PEI, pay? I don't know. Pi. And I said, but I want to add one more compatibility that very few people mention. And very few people even focus on it. And that is, I'll call it spiritual compatibility. So now it's pies. And what do I mean by spiritual compatibility? 2 people who share a vision of life, who have an idea what kind of home and family they want to build, what kind of mark they want to leave in this world. The first 3 don't talk about that at all. They could, but they're not necessarily talking about it. And it's only the 4th that creates Yesod, the bond, that can be forever. The first 3 can never be forever. Because exactly what they all there said was right. Physical looks change. Nobody looks the same when they're 20 and when they're 80. Definitely, even you don't have to go all the way to 80. Nobody. The emotions change. Sometimes the person you're with, you got bored with, and you need someone else. It's a common thing. And same thing intellectually. Those things all go through vicissitudes. They all go through mood changes. They all go through growth. As a matter of fact, things that you're accustomed to become boring. Whereas spiritual compatibility is not about your needs. It's not about what I get. Physical, I'm attracted to you. I feel for you, you feel for me. We stimulate each other intellectually. Spiritual compatibility is what you give, what you build. It's a commitment to something greater than the sum of the parts. That's why it can last forever. Because if it's just the sum of the parts are not forever, how could the sum of the parts be forever? But a vision is a connection to something that's greater, transcendent. That's the word, transcendent. And the truth is, it's a commitment that begins long before you meet anybody. It's whether you're committed to transcendence in your personal life. If you're not committed to finding your own soul, how are you going to find your soulmate? So it's about a soulful experience that most of us, as I said, are not trained to think this way. It's not what we're taught. We're taught go out and get it. There are physical things, emotional, intellectual. This idea of a vision, of a cause, a calling, is not the most common thing. Some people have it also by, I suppose, they grow up in a healthy family, the family had that type of commitment, and it carries over. But it's not automatic today, because there's so many distractions. There's so many forces that rip us away from those foundational elements in our lives. The interesting thing is, as bad as I paint the picture on one end, the other side is also positive, is equally powerful in the beautiful side. We're all capable at any moment to access this. This is not like, if you didn't have any foundational elements, you no longer can have them. The first step is you have to be aware. You have to crave and long for it. That you want to have a foundation, something that lasts. The problem is that we see so many people that things don't last. We think we're also one of them. So then that becomes the blind leading the blind. It becomes a vicious cycle of commitment being almost either a dirty word or just an impossible reality. So it's very much connected to finding your own so-called deeper calling. What can we do? You want to ask something?
I'm just curious. But I think in the relationship, all four need to be there, right? Just to confirm that it's not spiritual is not enough, just spiritual.
Absolutely. I should have qualified that. Absolutely. But absolutely, if you can find all four, that's great. Like I said, some people are happy with 2 out of 3, or 1 out of 3. Everyone should be blessed to have all 4. But let's put it this way: the 4th one will infuse the other 3 with a power that's enduring. Why do you think you can find people who are married 60 years and they still love each other, and they're not naive, and they're not stupid, and they're not just comfortable? Is because they have a connection that transcends the changes they went through. But besides the fact that both of them are older now, obviously, but it's not just the selfish need for me to have someone that looks good. It's a deeper connection that is deeper than just the look. So again, obviously you need to have people like that will tell you, I find the other person beautiful. You have the story of the guy that was, unfortunately his wife had Alzheimer's, and she slowly was forgetting, to the point she started forgetting him. So one of the nurses says to him, Mr. whatever his name was, your wife does not recognize you anymore. What are you coming for? He used to come every day, bring her gifts, sit with her. So she doesn't recognize you at all. So he says to the nurse very simply, he says, yeah, but I recognize her. So you could say, 1 second, what's going on? He's not getting anything in return any longer. She's not giving him anything. She doesn't even know who he is. If anything, she's probably even being hurtful. That happens often as well. So what is that? What's going on? Some type of blind, why isn't he just selfish and go back, find someone else? Or don't find someone else, but you could use your time better. What's he coming for? Because there are things that are deeper. Obviously, this is connection that they had started not then, started years ago. But you don't drop out because it's not working on your terms. God forbid a mother or father and a child is sick at night, and they have a sleepless night. They're going to say, I'm only going to be up to 1 o'clock because I have to go to work tomorrow. When you love your child, it becomes more important than anything else. It becomes more important than your own needs. It doesn't begin with that. It begins with love, obviously. But love is not based on conditions. We all have elements of this. I guarantee you, no matter who even the most narcissistic people have elements of it. The question is, how strong is it in one person's life? Some people, it's just completely me, and it doesn't really matter. If I get something, I'm there. Not, I'm out. Like the guy that told me, he said to me, yeah, I have unconditional love. If she'll have unconditional love to me, I'll have unconditional love to her, that type of thing. So, I'm not suggesting anyone can go cold turkey and suddenly change our whole perspectives. My point here that I'm trying to address here is to bring light, to shed light on the issue. You know, when you shine the light, the spotlight on something, it right away makes you think. And that's the key here. The first step is to start thinking about this in a more serious way. Most of us don't give this much thought because it's one of those unspoken things. Either you have it or you don't have it. But it's something to be addressed because it affects us all, and it's very easy to measure levels of commitment. And if you're sure and you're not sure yourself, ask someone that knows you whether they see you as a committed person or not. Guaranteed they'll get a pretty good insight. You may not hear what you want to hear. That's the thing. And then there's the question is how we build it. How we build it comes down to what we value. If we value the superficial and the temporary and the impermanent, pretty rest assured that you're more or less not going to be building foundations so quickly, because that's what you're into. That's what gives you gratification. That's what satisfies your needs, and you can get off on that. You can get high on that. If you have serious addictions, then that usually replaces the foundational elements, because the addictions become the things that are feeding you, the things you look forward to. You know, if you think to yourself, what's the next most exciting thing I look forward to? That's a very telling, the answer to that question is very telling. You know, most of us would not even want to share what we're looking forward to. And it can also be very depressing and very, very lonely. So what you look forward to has a lot to do with what you're committed to, obviously. And usually the things, if someone looks forward to things that are very temporary, or very for the moment, or some type of self-medicating, or some type of numbing oneself, or some type of instantaneous pleasure, pretty much assured that their foundation is not being worked on. But we're not doomed. You have to start thinking differently. You don't have to focus on just those immediate needs. You could build foundational elements, and when you do, automatically, guaranteed, that your dependencies and addictions and commitments to things that are less healthy are gonna get weaker. It has to be that way, because energy dissipates. If your energy is all going toward temporary, impermanent things, that's your energy. If you find energy towards something that's more foundational, that's serious, that's more of a calling, basically you're basically what's the word? I don't know. So you're draining the energy, you're taking away the energy that's going to less healthy objectives. So it really comes down to how you focus yourself and focus your passions. And as I said, it's not about doing everything in one shot. It's beginning, finding something that's healthy, important, that you start doing once a week or once a day, something really healthy, and you start getting committed to it and you like it. The more you're committed to that, the more commitment is contagious, and it starts spilling over to other areas of our lives. That's how it is. It's always that way. Healthy commitments breed healthy commitments, and unhealthy commitments breed unhealthy ones. That's the way it is. That's the nature of the beast. So the key is to look at yourself. Maybe every morning we say Moda'ani. We acknowledge for you returning my soul to me. To look at your soul's calling, your calling. Do you have one? If you don't have one, is it important to you to have one? So start doing something about it. Talk to someone that can help you maybe discover it. Read something. It all comes down to that commitment as well. Now, of course, the catch-22 is, what happens if I'm not committed to be committed? Where do you begin? If I'm lacking commitment, I'm going to be lacking commitment to become committed. So it's a hard question to answer. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom and coming to some crisis or trauma that wakes you up. But I don't believe one has to wait for that. I think one of the ways to do it is to find things that are enjoyable but healthy. It doesn't have to be something you force. If it's commitment just to be committed, in most cases it's not going to last too long. But if it's something you find enjoyable, and it also is something good and healthy, that usually makes it a lot easier, because you're also enjoying it. You also find it pleasant. You find it something positive. That makes it, you don't have the resistance of just doing it because You're forcing yourself. So in each of us, case by case, it's hard for me to give a suggestion that will work for everybody. I think everybody's got to find that thing that you stick to. I can just tell you for myself, this class began in 1981. 82, 81, 82. How many years would that be? 31 years. It began completely unplanned. A fellow brought his friend. They were looking for a spiritual inspiration. And a mutual friend introduced us. They came, I was a student then, I was working in writing the Rebbe's talks. I was completely immersed in academic and scholarly works and stuff like that, like behind library walls. But I said, great, and we met. It was an informal meeting. We had an evening, I think it was a Thursday night that we met in my office. And then they asked, can they come back next week? No problem. They came back next week. Then they started coming every week. And started bringing a friend, another friend, and people from the music and entertainment industry at the time. And everyone here, sitting right here, is an extension from that. Because this class was never advertised. It was always word of mouth. Everyone that's come here, some friend brought them. Or I don't think an enemy would bring you, but a friend. So it's interesting to me because there are many times that this class could have easily stopped. It wasn't like I had to do it. There's moods, there's weather, there's changes. And so a lot of things have changed since 1982. But I remember, just in my own mind, for me, when you start something good, you never stop. That's what I was trained. And I remember there were times one person came. There was even one night, it was Shavuos. In 2 weeks we have the holiday of Shavuos. Shavuos happened to be Wednesday night. And the group that came, they didn't even know it was the holiday. Fine, suddenly they come. I'm not home yet, because I was in the synagogue, I was in the shul. I come home, I'm all dressed up, and my family was dressed up and everything. And they're saying, why are you all dressed up? So I said, yeah, you're special guests. They say, yeah, but you didn't dress up last week. So we sat them down, they had this festive meal, they had no clue they were coming to. And then I told them what Shavuos is, and that was the class. Wednesday night was a Shavuos night. And I said, well, I don't know if I'm going to dress up next week again, but tonight we did. So my point is, I never stopped it. And it goes back to the story with Rabbi Akiva. Famous story, Rabbi Akiva was a man in this period in time, counting the Omer, Rabbi Akiva is a prominent figure. Rabbi Akiva became the greatest sage in the Talmud. He didn't begin that way, however. He was, some say, grew up was a convert or was a child of converts. Some say he had no Torah background until he was 40 years old. That's a fact. There are different opinions where he grew up. And Rabbi Akiva met this beautiful woman, daughter of a wealthy Jewish man in Jerusalem, and they fell in love. But he was a man that had no scholarship, had no study. She was his inspiration. She said, you could begin now. She gave him that confidence. But he wasn't sure. What does he do at 40 years old? 40 years old. No, he's not no longer a kid. Whether you consider 40 young or old today, I'm not going to get into that. But 40 years old, definitely you're not just an impressionable child any longer. So he was walking one day in the woods, pondering this issue, what he should do with his life. And as he was walking, he noticed a little brook, a waterfall, and drops of water were dropping on the stone there. As he looked closer, he saw an odd sight. The stone had a perfectly drilled, bored-through hole, through and through, as if like someone drilled a hole. How's a hole in the stone? How could it be that perfect? And then he realized that the drops of water from the waterfall kept on dropping through that hole. He realized over the years, these drops had that impact. And he said to himself that if an inanimate stone can be born through, can be pierced in such a perfect way, just by a drop, one drop, you think one drop on the stone will not do anything. But keep doing it. It ultimately will bear through, and how much more so with a soul. And he took her suggestion seriously. He then committed, went to study, and came back the greatest Talmudic sage of all time. The entire Kula Liba de Rabbi Akiva. It's an unbelievably inspiring story of commitment. It wasn't about cramming and studying all day and all night. It was about the drops, drop by drop by drop, but never stopping. The impact of that is unbelievable impact. And that's a lesson in a real yesod. And look what a man became because of that. So this was the lessons that I've learned when I was a child. So I never stopped the class. Today, I don't even know, 30,000, 40,000 people probably came through this class. In those years, there was no such thing as emails, there was no connections altogether. I remember many of the names. I meet people now, 30 years later, we still remember each other. We even have old videotapes from like 1986 or 87. You know, those VHS, whatever they're called. What were they called, right? And I'm only saying that, I'm not saying this for any personal reason, but only as a message, a lesson. One of the best ways to start building foundation in your life is to do something and stick to it. Whether it's starting a class, whether it's studying with someone. Philip Namaworth, who gives a class Thursday nights, so he has a heart condition. He's unable to come to my class back in when was it? Right now the late 80s, the 90s maybe. So I suggested to listen, can't come to my class, why don't you start a class in your apartment? He began studying with a guy called Josh, and he now gives a class till this day every Thursday night. My point is, it's the small things that are consistent. That's what build foundations. You look at a powerful tree, the biggest redwoods, they all started with a seed. And they didn't grow overnight. Slowly. Nurture it consistently. And that's what real things are about in life. The things that respect the process, but never stop. There's a constant commitment. That's the key to every successful thing in life. I challenge anyone to find me an exception to that. Especially enduring things, there's no question about it, but even things that are not so enduring, because it's the persistence that distinguishes between most people who just give up at some point when it gets too difficult, or they're distracted, or whatever it may be, and those that see it through. So all of you have that ability to build, and you do that on small levels, guarantee that it will spill over into the most important areas of your life, which is commitment in relationship, commitment to yourself, commitment to a calling, commitment to whatever it is that deserves your undivided and absolute commitment and conviction. So that's yesod for you, a foundation, the foundation of our lives, a state of bonding, to bond with something. People say, I like it, I love it, but I don't bond with it. Bonding is a great gift when it's bonding to the right things. If you bond to the wrong thing, guaranteed that's the yesod of what they call klippa. That's the negative yesod. That's foundation in the unholy foundations. And holy foundations is a bond to something that is pure, that is real, that is greater than yourself, and absolute commitment to it. And everybody's capable of it. And just to eliminate even more excuses, if you think you're not, and you want to talk about it some more, I'm more than happy to speak to anyone here about things that you may be able to find in your life that you can commit to and connect to, and how it will affect the rest of everything you do. Now, more details on this yesod, if you have my Omer book, that comes out that every day counts. There's 7 days in this week of yesod. Each day focuses on another aspect of this foundation, the love of the foundation, the gevura, and all are necessary to make it really effective. And we also send out a daily email about these Omers, and there's an app, using all the technologies available, all the platforms. So hopefully my words here are words from the heart, enter the heart, that allow everybody here to access a little of the yesod, especially this week, the energy of the week being that foundation and being that bonding and commitment. And hopefully it spills over not just this week, but in the following weeks and the following years of our lives. That everybody should be blessed here start with the biggest foundation of all, binyan adiyat, to find your true soulmate, and to be able to build an enduring and an everlasting and permanent structure called marriage, a love, a home, a family. And family means children and grandchildren that go on forever. That's one of the ways that things endure. And on a more personal scale, a type of enduring commitment to our own calling. Each of us have our indispensable mission and role to play. Everyone here in this room has something that you can contribute that no one else but you can contribute. I think that's pretty worthwhile to bond to such a calling. So God bless us all, and bless you all, that we find that calling, and have the wisdom and the courage to commit to it, and make sure that nothing can ever distract you from it. So until next week, we continue. The next week will be the last of the 7 weeks. It will be Malchus, dignity. I bid everyone a great week. Philip will be giving this class, I believe, tomorrow night. So if you want more information, please contact us. And any other way that we can help, I can help, or the Meaningful Life Center can help you, please call on us. We're committed to this. And thank you very much.
Thank you.